Welcome back to the Football League Paper Podcast. My name is Matt Badcock. As always, I'm joined by our FLP editor, John Lyons, and chief writer, Chris Dunlavy. Chaps, how are we? We managed to survive the international break.
Narrowly.
Yeah. Glad it's over. Almost over.
You know that it's that you're in desperate needs when you're drafting me in to write a piece for you, and I'm taking my non-league paper hat off. But back to normal this week, a busy week. Thanks everyone for joining us. Thanks for liking and subscribing if you have already. If you haven't, then please do so, because that really does help us. And we're going to dive straight in because we've had some news this morning. We were talking last week, weren't we, about the managerial vacancies in the Championship. Norwich City have filled theirs with Philippe Clement. Chris, a name that kind of came out of nowhere really in terms of who we were talking about last week, but what do you make of the appointment of the former Rangers manager?
It was right out of the blue, wasn't it? Because you had, I think for quite a bit of time there was the talk was about John Dahl Thomason and how he was the odds kept sort of coming down, and it looked like it was going to be him. And I think he did get quite a long way along the interview process. For whatever reason, they decided that wasn't for them and have gone for Clement. Like I say, it's a very sort of left field appointment. I do know the Rangers fans were, he spent 16 months there and didn't do a massive amount, but I think he's quite well regarded by Rangers fans. They liked his football, they liked him. I think he was probably aided by succeeding Michael Beale and being succeeded by Russell Martin, who were both wildly unpopular. He was very popular there. He's had a lot of success in Belgium, where he won 3 consecutive titles, then went to Monaco, then went to Rangers. His problem is going to be the same, the one that Liam Manning had, though, and that successive Norwich managers have had, is that unless they back him in January and get some players in, you're still going to have a very inexperienced squad. Take Josh Sargent out of that team, and you've got essentially a bunch of kids really sort of trying to find their way in the Championship. Is that what he's going to be used to? Does he know what he's signed up for? I think he is going to need long term. He is going to need some back, and they are going to need to strengthen. I don't think the summer window was, that the summer window, the players they signed in that window were players for 2 years down the line, not for now. And I think at the minute, in the position they're in, what they really need, whether it's on loan, whether it's permanent, are some established players who know what they're doing in this division, who can get them out of things. And if they don't give them with that, I don't think it matters who's in the dugout, really.
Yeah, John, is that one where he kind of makes a beeline for Josh Sargent and takes him out for, I don't know, a steak dinner, and kind of just does everything, offers to do his washing for him and all sorts of stuff, and makes him as happy as possible, because he's, obviously there's always rumours flying around about him and clubs who are going to want him because of, his record there and how important he is to that side. And, as Chris is saying, lots of things to sort out, but I guess he's going to be one who's going to be key to how he gets them going again as well.
Yeah, and I think probably from that point of view as well, he needs Josh Sargent sort of fit and firing, because I think unfortunately Josh Sargent was affected by probably the lack of confidence in the squad and the sort of negative vibes there towards the end of sort of Liam Manning's reign. So I think his own form sort of fell away. So he's now got about 6 weeks now until probably the new year. Philippe Clement to have a proper look at his squad, see what he needs, and I think if he can get, one of the crucial things will be to get Josh Sargent fit and firing for the new year. Obviously, not by the new year, and if he can, then there might be some clubs sort of coming in for him as well. But probably not an appointment that will necessarily have got pulses racing. I wouldn't have thought, but things seem to be going all right at Rangers, and it sort of seems to sort of peter out a little bit there. So we'll have to see how he gets on at Norwich under the restrictions that they've kind of got or whatever. But I think obviously one of the keys will be to get, if he can get Josh Sargent up and running and scoring goals again, then it's going to make his life an awful lot easier.
It's a big one for Ben Napper, the sporting director there, because he's basically the guy. You know, Manning wasn't even getting that much stick, really. I mean, the lion's share of the sort of protests and the abuse that was coming from the stands was towards Ben Napper, the sporting director, not towards Manning. So he's, you know, for his own sake, he's got to get this one right. Otherwise, that is going to, you know, the heat's going to come straight back on him, and the focus is going to be back on him again. So it's a huge appointment for him as well.
Yeah, Chris, a busy period coming up with, you know, obviously there's Saturday's game. I think I've got Birmingham. There's midweek fixtures as well, isn't there, coming up in the coming month as well? Is it a good time to sort of come in from that point of view and have as many games quickly as possible, do you think?
I don't know. If you're a new manager, you kind of want you probably want to come in at the start of the international break, don't you, really? Have a bit of time to get, you know, your players and get your system in place. So, no, I mean, I dare say you'd have preferred to have a week longer on the training ground. But, you know, it is what it is. You take the jobs when you can get them. And if nothing else, it'll let them have a look at the players in the heat of battle and know which ones are up for it and which aren't.
I remember that classic one like we were talking about with Liam Richardson the other week. We went in at Reading and learning good defeats where you learn lots of lessons like that against Carlisle, which was not one that you would have you enjoyed watching when you're on the sideline thinking, what have I actually taken on? But that's the life of a manager. And we were talking about Middlesbrough as well last week, and Kim Hellberg seems to be the name on, you know, out there. He seems to have been talking to quite a few people though, Chris. He's been on the lips of quite a few clubs.
He's the name on everyone's lips. He was basically, well, it was a bit puzzling, wasn't it? So I remember there was a lot of the reports that have been sort of flying around have all been coming out with Swedish media, and they said he was flying to London for talks with Swansea, which obviously seems kind of strange on the face of it. But now that we know he spoke to Norwich and that he also spoke to Middlesbrough, where it's pretty apparent why the talks were held in London and not in Swansea, because he was meeting everybody else at the same time. But he literally, I think Norwich spoke to him in the most informal sense. I don't think there was any kind of interview process there. They just sounded him out, and I think his head was elsewhere. But Swansea was their first choice target. They wanted him. They thought they had him. They interviewed him earlier this year when they gave the job to Alan Sheehan. A lot of the board wanted to give it to him then. I bet they wish they had. But because Alan Sheehan was on such a good run at the time, they felt it couldn't, you know, it wouldn't look good, wouldn't be popular with supporters if they did that. And then they went back in for him. They thought they had him. Obviously, Middlesbrough have come back, and, you know, objectively, you look at it from his point of view, and you'd say, well, do I take over this team with a record of recent instability, lack of investment, kind of struggling at the wrong end, or do I take over at Middlesbrough with, you know, chairman with a track record of providing support and a lot of money, and a team who are pushing for promotion to the Premier League? I mean, it's, you know, what you're going to do if you're him. It's obvious, isn't it? So shame for Swansea, because they've had to go back to the drawing board after a lot of work. But yeah, you can't blame Borough for jumping in.
Yeah, I've sort of got visions of him, you know, like a Mrs. Doubtfire, where he's jumping between different interviews in the restaurant. He's sort of like in a hotel in London, sort of I've just got to nip out for 1 second, sort of going and speaking to someone else. But as Chris says, John, Middlesbrough and the situation they're in, and, you know, what the sort of the size of the club and where they've been, that must sort of come into your thinking.
Yeah, it does on the face of it. Does look, a great opportunity for him. But I mean, perhaps there was a little bit of a feeling that they'd slightly probably overachieved so far this season. But obviously, now that they have done well, confidence is high. They've got that momentum on their side. Obviously, they had that one game, didn't they, where Rob Edwards wasn't there, and they won that before the international break. So that sort of sent them into the break on a little bit of a boost after obviously the blow of losing sort of Rob Edwards to Wolves. So you think on the face of it, yes, it's a decent opportunity to team up there, and can he sort of get in there now and, you know, steer them in that right direction once the deal's all sort of cut and dried.
Yeah, and Chris, Middlesbrough, you know, obviously the fans were upset about Edwards' departure and how that came about, and they're going to want to get behind the new man really, really quickly, aren't they? And they're the sort of fan base that once they are behind you, they can take you a long way as well.
Well, yeah, it is that sort of club. When things start barreling, they can really get going, and when things are going badly, you can have half the places empty. But it's a curious one because he in quantity, right? Like, I mean, it's a risk. As popular as he is, and clearly all the data is saying that he's going to be a success in the Championship. It is still a risk. You look at the top end of the Championship, and the managers there are sort of Lampard, 200, 300 games as a manager. Mark Robbins, I don't even know how many, probably pushing towards 1,000 by now. There was Rob Edwards, who'd won a promotion from this league. You've got Paul Heckenbottom, who's won a promotion from this league. So you look at the top end of the league, and it is experience that's winning the day. So I think that as good as this guy may be, you've got to say it's still a risk for Borough. It would have been a risk for whoever appointed him, whatever the data may say. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he goes.
Yeah, John, it's Chris saying there that not the fashion is kind of, we've seen it over the sort of slightly unknown left field managers coming in, but that experience does seem to count for a lot. And I'm sure he'll be sort of immersing himself around with the right people. Is that kind of key to it as well? Getting people around, I think of like with Danny Roll when he came in at Sheffield Wednesday, people like Chris Powell and his staff and that sort of thing.
It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see who he does bring in, or if he's going to continue on with maybe some of Rob Edwards' backroom staff, or if he's going to bring all his own guys in. So that is going to be interesting to see, because obviously the downside from his point of view is that he's not got a pre-season to work on his team. He's coming in the middle of November, so he's going to have to sort of get to grips with his squad quite quickly. You would imagine that he's not going to want to make drastic changes to a team that are flying high. So there might be sort of more little tweaks here and there. On the plus side, he's got that time now before January to have a look around and see what he maybe needs to strengthen for that second half of the season, or if he finds out there's areas that he feels they're a bit lacking.
It'll be a bit like Josh Sargent again, though, won't it? It'll be trying to keep Hayden Hackney there, because I assume there'll be a bit of interest in him in January. So that'll be the one I imagine he'll be hell bent on keeping. Yeah,
there was a bit of talk about him in the summer, wasn't there? That he was kind of Ipswich were kind of quite, clearly very talented. But a huge weekend ahead, as we say. Obviously League One and League Two in the main carried on through the international break. Obviously there were some games that were affected by international call-outs, but the Championship is fully back. A couple of big derbies this weekend. Obviously Preston Blackburn on Friday night, and the Sheffield derby on Sunday. Sheffield derby is going to be an interesting one, Chris, isn't it? With kind of all the backstory. It would kind of be nice actually for a game to sort of break out between the two. It's not been the happiest of periods for either sets of supporters, and bragging rights up for grabs as they always are. But it's kind of with the context of everything, I think some people just be pleased that they're having that game as well. Anyway,
yeah, it's a strange one, isn't it? Because it's normally like, you think of that game, and it would normally be sort of the highlight of the season, and it would be like this sort of huge thing that everyone looks forward to. But it does almost feel certain, with everything that's gone on at Sheffield Wednesday and stuff. It's almost like the sort of, like you say, the backstory is bigger than the game in some ways. But it's it'll still be a great occasion, and it will be a nice distraction, I think, from everything that's going on certainly for Sheffield Wednesday. But you'd never, imagine you'd sort of said, I mean, I think everybody could have anticipated that Sheff Wed would be where they are, but certainly not this would be a sort of clash down the bottom of the table. So, it's for... I mean, I'm going to, like I always do in any big derby, I'm going to back the 0-0, because they're normally good and everybody kicks each other for 90 minutes and nothing of much interest happens beside the odd scuffle. So that's what I'm going for. And maybe, who knows, a debut for either Patrick Bamford or Liam Cooper, who they both signed as free agents this week. Obviously, Patrick going in at Sheffield United, which is obviously interesting because he was slagging off Chris Wilder in public 6 months ago. So
was he slagging him off? Was he just singing a song? I can't remember what it was. Was he singing a song?
I'm not singing a song.
Back as well. Was it a while to go back as well? Or was that?
It was when Leeds won promotion. So it was when Leeds won. You'd had a beer, obviously. in the celebrations afterwards, and he was stood outside. I don't know. I think it was outside Ellen Road.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah,
Feeding the fans and a bit of a whiler kicking. But
Chris Wilder probably likes all that sort of thing, though, don't you think? In a funny sort of way,
he said about because Bamford obviously sobered up and rang him up the next day and apologised. But Wilder said, it's all good fun, all banter. He doesn't mind, and I mean, wasn't Wilder sort of caught doing the same thing after the?
You're talking about Danny Rowe, yeah.
Danny Rowe. So he can't really complain anyway, can he? But anyway,
there is something brilliant about sort of managers and players kind of sort of, obviously the phone technology, social media world, it is different, isn't it, these days? It probably happened quite a lot, but there's something great about like the players or managers going and getting in with the fans and sort of kind of singing the songs, and it shows that sort of they're not just kind of in a zoning out while the game's going on and not hearing what's happening. I always think about Darryl Clark years ago when he was at Bristol Rovers, and he was in the I think it was in the semi-final when they beat Forest Green, I think it was, and then he was in the boozer with the fans singing songs. And I think they're playing Grimsby in the final, and I think Grimsby Telegraph sort of picked it up, and because he was sort of singing about we're going up and all this sort of stuff, and there was this whole sort of like back and forth in the week. And I think after they won, I think he was then caught again, sort of saying, sort of like, stick that in the Grimsby Telegraph or something like that. And it sort of always kind of like follows around that sort of history. But it's quite amusing. It's a good way to get fans on side. But yeah, obviously,
I think the only thing is you've got to be a bit. Obviously, then you need to keep trying to get the results, don't you? Because I think that was a Vitor Pereira, wasn't it, at Wolves? Was out last season, wasn't he, having drinks with fans in the pub, and he was Mr. Popular, and then obviously this season it's all turned around. He's having arguments with fans, and then it's he's off, and obviously Borough have lost their Rob Edwards, so it's got to be careful as well.
Probably
got to keep getting the results.
Probably a good way to gauge where you stand. Sort of like pop your head in a pub every sort of few Saturdays and see how people react to you. And
send an envoy. We send an envoy first.
Yeah, some people in for you and sort of. But no, yeah, obviously Sheffield Wednesday have been allowed to sign Liam Cooper as well, and I guess, John, that's going to be important. They've obviously been given dispensation by the EFL. There's talk of others coming in as well. I think Duncan Watmore and has been in training as well, and I think Nathan Redmond. So there's sort of talk about, are they coming through the door as well? Is it only going to be one? But Sheffield Wednesday, the sort of feel-good factor in a weird way has been back around the club over the last couple of weeks since they've gone into administration, and Chanziri's been booted out and the seats have been changed and all that kind of stuff. And there does feel like a real sort of bizarre, even though probably more points deductions come in, relegation's almost certain. There seems to be this real, everybody's looking forward, and the future feels a lot brighter, even though obviously there's no new buyer confirmed, or that's still going through the bidding process. But it could be a great day for Sheffield Wednesday if they could use that home advantage, use the crowd behind them, and nick something against the Blades.
Yeah, I think you talk about the sort of feel good factor there at Sheffield Wednesday. I think the fact is, obviously the fans have been spending more money, haven't they? There's more revenue coming into the club. Players are getting their wages paid on time now and stuff. So there's been it's quite a lot of progress under the administrators. So it's obviously going to be a big clash on Sunday. Sheffield United will probably be, with the players that they've got on paper, the favourites. But as I say, with Liam Cooper coming in, that's another bit of experience for Sheffield Wednesday, and they probably could do with that bit extra nous, that bit extra leadership, aside from Barry Bannon putting sort of too much pressure on him. I think Sheffield United will fancy it there on Sunday, but you can imagine Sheffield Wednesday aren't going to make it easy for them.
Well, I think Hillsborough will be rocking. I think not all that long ago, there was talks about this game being part of a boycott as well. Obviously, things have accelerated much quicker since then. So, yeah, that'll be an interesting one. yeah, like Chris says, you can't, almost impossible to predict these.
Yeah, there have been a few 0-0s in recent times, haven't there, and 1-0s and stuff. So be fingers crossed for an early goal, get it going.
Get early goals going. I remember going to a Sheffield derby quite a few years ago, and Mike Dean managed to sort of send off 2 players as well, completely needlessly, which made it more interesting. Only time I've ever been at a game and seen a goalkeeper penalised for holding the ball more than 6 seconds. You've never seen it, and it happened in stoppage time in a derby, and it was I think James Beattie sort of was playing up front for Sheffield United then, and Sheffield Wednesday winning 1-0, and yeah, it was the sort of the classic everybody on the line, keeper in front of the wall in the sort of the dying stages of the game. And it's the only time I've ever seen that happen. So yeah, hopefully Mike Dean's not refereeing, otherwise it could be difficult game for both sides. Let's move on into League One and kind of this bonkers weekend that we had as well. We were saying in the office on Saturday, John, weren't we? You can't predict what's going to happen in League One at the minute. But Lincoln going second after beating Doncaster, a great result for the Imps, and managed to make the front page of the FLP as well.
Yeah, well, we with sort of limited program on Saturday, wasn't it, in League One, and most of the top teams weren't in action, so it was a great opportunity for Lincoln to get that 3 points to go joint top with Stockport. And I think they're looking at it now. It was level on goal difference as well, so I think it was just on goals scored that they're below Stockport. So yeah, you've got to give credit to Michael Skubala for the job that he's doing there to get them right up there now. It looked like cracking atmosphere there, big crowd on Saturday. I don't think many people would have expected them to be up there. So it's nice to see some different teams sort of raising the profile of the division a little bit as well and sort of spreading it around. So we've got to see how they cope now that they've got sort of right up near the top, and see if they can keep it going.
Yeah, Chris, as John says, Skubala doing a brilliant job there at Central Bank.
Yeah, it feels like it's just been building, hasn't it? I think ever since he gone in, it's been sort of steady progress. And I was talking to Adam Reach recently. Obviously, he signed there as a free agent, and he was sort of saying about, and again, it's something that kind of slightly bucks the modern trend about how they've got quite a lot of older guys, and especially at the back. So they've got lots of sort of 30+ defenders, and they've got Adam himself, and it's kind of that thing of, it's from a business standpoint, you want young players, but if you want to win things, you do want old players as well. And I think it's partly, it's Skubala's clearly a very good coach who's his system works, but he's also, it's a nice blend. That's what it is. They've got a nice blend of old players and young players that just kind of, one can help the other in various ways. And it's sort of all like, plodding along nicely. I guess the only thing is they've gone second, and you look down at the Stevenage and, they win, they go second from 6th, I think. So it's so tight, I think, and literally any of that sort of top 6-7 clubs can, you wouldn't put money on it, would you? It could be any of them. Literally one win can change your 5 positions.
Yeah, and maybe that brings us on to Burton Albion as well. They've sort of flying up the table not that long ago. They're in the relegation zone now. They've just moved into the top half after beating Blackpool on Saturday, and it's probably, John, it just goes to, as a reminder that actually we're not very far into this season. There's a lot to go on. That's why it is so tight at the minute, and this is kind of the time now to really try and put these runs together before Christmas.
Yeah, I think we're about a third of the way through now. So I think you do have to give a lot of credit to Gary Bowyer for the job that he's done there. First of all, obviously when he came in last season in a very precarious position, and to get him out of trouble was a great achievement. And then you did sort of wonder at the start of this season, when the results weren't quite coming for them, whether it was going to be another struggle this season just to stay up. But he's done brilliantly, and the team have done brilliantly to get up to sort of mid-table now. Someone that seems to have stood out quite a bit when you watch their highlight reels and what have you is the midfielder Charlie Webster. He seems to be a real sort of creative spark with his long range shooting and his with his set pieces as well. So they've done really well to bring him in. And yeah, it's can they keep it going now? Obviously, they haven't maybe got the budget, the resources, but they've got sort of a really good team spirit there, and they've obviously got those players that can bring that little bit extra quality as well.
Yeah, because we've seen League One. It's kind of a bit of it's one of the most unique divisions, I always think, because you've got some real big hitters in there, and then you've got kind of the other end of the sort of spectrum kind of merge into this one division. But it does show that you can, even up against some of the sort of bigger budgets, thrive in that league.
Yeah, well, I think, funnily enough, I think it's been like that in the last few years. I would actually sort of say this year, it's about, in terms of the size of the teams, you've got rid of a lot of those really big. There was always for a lot of years, there's always been a Sheffield Wednesday or a Sheffield United, or going back to sort of Southampton back when, and there was all sort of a team who really shouldn't have been there, Sunderland, Leeds, and and even like last year you had Wrexham and Birmingham who had massive money. Whereas this year, I think it's reflected in the table. You've suddenly got a point where everyone's, and I've spoken to a few managers and they've said it as well, you're looking at it thinking, well, there's nobody really with masses more cash than anybody else, because Plymouth have come down, they're struggling. There was a time when Rotherham were guaranteed one of the promotion places when they'd bob up and down, and that's kind of stopped happening. So I think it's actually now there's a little bit of more equilibrium in that division than there's ever been before. And I think when we're talking about the crazy results, I think that's what it is. It's just that I think there's so evenly matched this year that you don't really have those bangers. There's anybody can beat anybody, and I wouldn't want to say anybody in the top 15 couldn't go and challenge, because we've seen it in the past where teams suddenly come from nowhere. So yeah, I think historically it was a division where you had these odd teams who shouldn't have been there, and that often worked against them. You look at Ipswich and how long they spent in there and couldn't get out despite being a huge club. But I think by and large they've gone, and suddenly it's this wide open playing field.
Yeah, John, do you think the sort of the Stockports of this world are, thinking, and we're saying like Lincoln and obviously Stevenage being up there, thinking this is a chance now to get into that championship, and then kind of everything that sort of spins on from there, and we know the sort of financial rewards that come from going just up that one league. Do you think that everybody will be sort of starting to think that now? Why not our year? And Stockport County, I mean, under Dave Challoner, they've been well used to being in the thick of promotion races and doing well.
Yeah, Dave Challoner his record has got to be sort of second to none, pretty much. Number of promotions that he's sort of down the years, obviously starting from his non-league days.
Yeah, I don't see why he doesn't get linked to more sort of higher up. I know Stockport County is a big club and they get great backing, and he's done unbelievably there. But I just can't see why he doesn't get linked to more of these sort of championship jobs when they come along.
Yeah, he's one of those ones where it seems to be for him that he's got to win promotion to work his way up the division. So he's sort of served his time in non-league, and he did brilliantly there, and then he eventually got into the EFL through promotions and what have you, and he's done a great job at Stockport. He always seems to be very demanding of his players. He always seems to want more from them, rightly so. So yeah, they're obviously up the top there at the moment. They're to be shot at, really. But you've got you look at Bradford, Bolton, Cardiff. There are some sort of fairly big, sort of biggish sort of clubs there who will fancy it as well. But obviously you've got a whole range of clubs there, and chairman will be enticed to probably splash a bit of cash in the new year to give their team that best chance of winning one of those spots, because as we were kind of alluding to there, this is probably a great season to really have a real go for it.
Yeah, Chris, talking of splashing cash and a team that are up there, AFC Wimbledon, sort of an interesting storyline that's sort of coming out of there at the moment about, obviously they're so well known as this fan-owned model, but saying it's sort of not sustainable as it is. We've seen their sort of success and what they've built there, and the stadium and everything that they've achieved. But what's your sort of thoughts on that? Is that kind of just showing the sign of the times that, and actually how hard fan ownership is?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's just a kind of emblem of of how kind of wrong the finances in the game have gone. Really, I think it's just, if you look at a club like Wimbledon. So what they've come out and said is, they're a League One club. They're saying that the club, as it stands, as it's funded, can't sustain itself in League Two, let alone League One. And this is a club who, by and large, have done everything right, like you say. They've built the infrastructure. They've got a lot of fans. The average 8,500 fans. Good gates at that level. They run on. They try and make themselves self-sustainable, but it just isn't possible. It isn't possible, and it kind of cuts to the heart of the problem in the EFL, which is that if you want to be successful, you cannot be run as a sustainable business, as they are proving. It is impossible. You can't do it. The only way to, possibly, because of wage inflation, which comes from the Premier League, which comes from parachute payments, which drives everything else up as people try to compete. And that wage inflation over the years means that literally the only way to compete is if you have a rich owner covering millions and millions of pounds worth of losses per year. So what Wimbledon effectively shows is that practically every club is the only way to get success is to be an unsustainable business, which I think really, if you take those two things, it's insane. It's an insane business model, but that's somehow the position we've got ourselves into.
Yeah, John, it shows the insanity of the business, because we were talking about how do you compete against these sides and clubs, and it is impossible. We've seen, it's kind of almost a sad sort of indictment of where we are in a game, but also, sad that, Wimbledon have done so much, achieved so much as a fan-owned club, and then they're still in this sort of position.
Yeah, I think it sort of probably indicates that you can, with a fan-owned club, quite often you can get to a certain point, you can get to that ceiling, and perhaps League One is that ceiling where you can get to that level. But then once you get there, you're going to need some other investors to come in. You're going to need some outside investment if you want to stay, well, even just sort of stabilize there before even sort of looking to go further forward. On the pitch, Johnny Jackson, the manager, and his players, they've done brilliantly over the last year or two, and they're up near the top reaches of League One. They're at the moment, they're usually for the odd blip, but they're usually very tough to break down. So who's to say they can't manage a promotion shot this season? But obviously, then if they were to get into the Championship, then they're going to need more money, more revenue to buy the kind of players that they need to compete at that level. So obviously, they'd have more revenue coming in, but it can be quite a difficult situation all round if you do keep going up and up, because you do need that extra finance.
Yeah, I think you sort of look at Wrexham. Obviously, they went away from that fan-owned model when they're in non-league, and obviously brought in the mega stars that they did, that have catapulted them from frankly struggling to get out of the National League and not able to compete with other clubs that were sort of chucking money around to now where they are. Kind of a difficult one from an AFC Wimbledon fan's point of view, if they are going to end up having to make that sort of kind of vote on that sort of decision. But is there an answer to it, Chris? Because this is what we want from the game, and the independent regulator coming in and looking at all this kind of sort of stuff. This is not a new argument in football at all levels about how clubs are funded and how they aren't sustainable and how the biggest budget tends to win the day. Is there an answer to this, do you think?
No, and I think there's nothing wrong with the biggest budget winning the day if that budget is, if it's fair, if you're generating that revenue yourself and everybody's getting a fair share of the other revenue that comes in, that's fine, right? Like that's the way of the world. That's how it's always been. If you're a bigger club, you'll generally have more money and do well. But the problem that you've got, the problem you've got is it's not the revenue that's being generated by clubs that's driving it. It's the revenue that's being generated by the Premier League that's driving it. And I think, personally, until you can ask Ask any owner, ask any chairman in the EFL, and they'll all tell you the same thing. And until you get rid of parachute payments, which are the thing that drive everything else, because the clubs come down with parachute payments and everybody else tries to compete with them. Until you get rid of those, it won't work. Even redistribution won't work without the removal of parachute payments. It will not work. So, but there's no appetite to, and I don't have the answers. Unless someone's going to force the Premier League to do it, they'll take you to court. So I'm afraid you need a better man than me to come up with the answers. But that is whilst parachute payments from the Premier League exist and they are the size they are, you're going to have this problem will not go away. You will have small clubs who can't compete and have to run at a loss to even try.
Yeah, I guess a toothpaste out the tube on that point of view, but also it encourages clubs to gamble as well, doesn't it, John? And trying to get up, and probably seen that with the mess that Sheffield Wednesday have got themselves in. They gambled on it, didn't work, didn't get up, and kind of a lot of their problems have rolled on from there. But that's not good, is it? That if you're kind of basically going into a casino and rolling the dice and seeing what comes up, whether you succeed long term or not.
Yeah, well, there are going to be some owners who are going to think, well, they want to have a gamble and go for it, but obviously it's not always going to work, is it? So you're always going to have then clubs who have taken that gamble and that they're going to pay for it in the following years, and that could be a situation where that owner who's put them in trouble isn't there after that, and it's the club, it's the fans, and everyone else who gets affected long term. I mean, the situation with the parachute payments has over the years has got out of hand. Probably should have, as you started suggesting with your toothpaste line there. It probably was a situation where it never should have really started in the first place. And I think there was that talk. If you're in the Championship and you're potentially going to win promotion to Premier League, or you're going to get potentially relegated out of the Premier League play, there should only be the two contracts there. So you've got one for if you're staying in the top division, one if you're in the Championship. So you don't automatically need a massive handout to keep you going if you drop down.
It definitely sounds like my two contracts I have at work. If I write a piece for the Football League paper, they pay me double, like you boys. So it's always welcome when the international break comes along. But we'll drop into League Two now, and Newport County, obviously David Hughes, all changed there. It came out on Saturday night, didn't it, John? There was that slightly bonkers sort of report from the other week as well, and that game that we were talking about, Chris, as well, when we sort of between us during last week. But interesting times for the Welsh outfit, and an appointment they're going to have to get right. Obviously, lost 11 out of 16. I think, Chris, did you say that Michael Flynn was linked with a return, but possibly not happening now? What's your sort of understanding?
Yeah, well, I think it was probably boogie talk, to be perfectly honest. He was sort of immediately installed as the favourite, because obviously, he's a hometown guy. He's managed them before, had success there. But I mean, I've talked to Flinny a lot over the years, and I think he, if you need a job, you need a job. So I wouldn't have ruled it out, but I do think he found managing his hometown club a bit intense by the end, and that was why he went elsewhere and tried different things. And be stuff like when you managed them, you would he dropped his kids off at school, everybody wanted to talk about Newport. When he went to the supermarket, everybody wanted to talk about Newport, and I think he found it all a bit much. So I think maybe if that hasn't changed, then that'll be why he doesn't want to go back. Maybe they don't want him back. Who knows? But I mean, like you say, it's a massive appointment, because they've been struggling for a lot of years now, and they are in big trouble now. I think with David Hughes, they gambled on someone who to implement a style of football and quite a process-driven manager. And that hasn't really worked, probably because they haven't got the players to do what he wants. They haven't really got the resources to buy the players he wants. And what they probably need now is probably what Cheltenham went and got with Steve Cotterill, as someone who can just drag them out of it by hook or by crook, really.
Yeah, John, they're kind of in that sort of danger zone now of getting cut off, aren't they? If they're really not careful.
Yeah, and Funnily enough, I was on on a press call last week with Michael Appleton, the Shrewsbury manager, ahead of that game that they had against Newport at the weekend. And that was obviously at the time that was the bottom two that were playing each other. So it was, it's just from what he was saying and speaking to him, you could tell how huge a game that was going to be. And obviously Shrewsbury got the 1-0 win and got the points and pulled themselves out of the relegation zone. And unfortunately, that was the end for David Hughes. But from a Shrewsbury point of view, Michael Appleton would have been absolutely delighted to have got those 3 points, and they have actually started to sort of turn things around. I think that made it 11 points from the last 6 games or something along those lines. So they, after a terrible start, they've really started to put a run of results together. Got a few home wins, so it's looking a bit rosier for them. Whereas obviously Newport lost that game, and they don't want to obviously risk getting cut adrift. So they've got to make sure they get their next appointment 100% right.
Yeah, again, that's the sort of the funny thing about that league as well, isn't it? At the minute where it is so tight, you can sort of jump up quite quickly. They're only sort of 4 points right off mid-table now, Shrewsbury, aren't they? So it's it's still lots of football has been played, but I think we're kind of getting down to that crucial point. Chris, what do we make of Walsall as well? I mean, sort of had obviously that kind of last season where they looked nailed on for it all kind of fell apart a little bit. Kamar Roof signing there as well, an interesting one. Could be a good sign for them, kind of get them going again. They've been sort of slightly out of form at the moment.
Yeah, well, it'd be an interesting one because obviously I think this year any slight dip in form is going to give Walsall fans the jitters, isn't it? Any time they slightly come off it after what happened last season is going to get everyone worried. But they've got a good team, and I think Kamar Roof. It's an interesting one because I remember watching him in the Championship with Leeds. And at the time, he was sort of hot property. I think everyone was talking about him as getting possibly going to the Premier League. And he's a good player, good forward. He got great movement. He went to Rangers and scored a lot of goals there. So if he can find that sort of form, he is clearly a cut above League Two. So if they can keep him fit and get him firing, then that could be the difference. Because ultimately, that was what cost them last year, was when Nathan Lowe went back to Stoke, the whole season disappeared, just collapsed really, didn't it? So it was goals. They just weren't scoring enough goals. So if they can't get him firing, he's a class act at that level. It's just whether he's still got the fitness, whether he's still sort of got the hunger to do it. But he's a hometown guy as well. So he spoke a lot when he joined last week about how he'd grown up there. He'd gone to games when he was younger and all that sort of stuff. So you'd think it would all be there for him.
Yeah, Johnny's only 32 as well. And do you kind of buy into that, hometown boy kind of coming, turning up to help fire your team to promotion? Is something, I guess the journalists in us, we sort of like those sort of stories, don't we?
Yes, it's a good story. It's a good line to go on if things go well. But as I say, 32, I think he's going to be turning 33 in a couple of months, so he should still have quite a fair bit left in the tank. You would have thought. I think it's just at the moment. I think it's just a short-term deal until January. So he's got that time to get some games, get some fitness. It obviously puts him in the shop window. Potentially, obviously helps out his hometown club Walsall as well. So hopefully it's a move that's going to suit both parties, work well for both parties, and adds another experienced player to Walsall's ranks. So obviously got Albert Adoma, Jamil Matt. So they got some real experience there in attacking positions, and you've got to give a lot of credit to Colchester at the weekend for the way that they went there and did a job on Walsall, and some impressive performances from them. They're looking sharp. Obviously, they had the problems ahead of the game with their coach breaking down, I think the day before, and also another puncture, I think, on the day of the game, and players getting taxis to the ground and all that sort of stuff. So a brilliant achievement for them to then go and win that game. And they're still mid-table. We keep saying that they keep winning. They never seem to make much progress up the table. So it's going to be interesting the next few weeks if they can actually get up there a bit higher up there into that sort of top 7 or around that area.
Yeah, Chris John says great.
A couple of years ago, actually, Bristol City. Was it Bristol? Yeah, it was Bristol City. I think it was first game of the season against Hull. They were at Hull and the bus had broken down. And Nigel Pearson turned up on his own. And turned out that, the bus had broken down and Nigel Pearson just got a taxi by himself to the stadium. And I think all the rest of them had sort of been bundled onto some kind of minibus that ordered, but he just got his own taxi and come himself.
Oh, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not getting that. You think if you're Danny Cowley, you're out slashing the coach's tyres next time you're away as well? Sort of. It seemed to work. Well. A bit of adversity brings you all together, doesn't it? That kind of thing. World against.
I think the chairman's going to be happy.
Yeah. Because they've got some good. I mean, they look because they've got some good firepower, Colchester, with Samson Tavide and Harry Anderson there as well, Kyrese Lisby. So they've got some players there who can sort of get a sprinkling of goals. So look like quite an exciting team. So we've got one or two nice young players there that are worth keeping an eye on as well.
Yeah, we obviously met Kyrese, didn't we? At our National Game Awards last year. He came along with his brother Kyrell, who won our Young Player of the Year, and is now obviously at Peterborough. So seems to be Lisby's everywhere. They sort of more and more turn up out throughout non-league each week. They're I guess if you're growing up as Kevin Lisby's sons, you're going to be going into football, aren't you? But what else we've got to look forward to in this week's paper then, John? It's early stages, I know, in your planning, but a busy week ahead.
Yeah. I think we're going to be pretty sort of hectic this week. Not as bad as last week when we had lots of pages to fill because of the international break. But we'll have the regular stuff that we usually have. Try and get as many interviews as we can with sort of some players this week as well. So plenty to look forward to.
Well, as I said, there's a brilliant Barnett piece in there last week. I don't know who wrote that, but it was very good. I enjoyed that on Sunday morning. And as if you subscribe, it will come straight into your through your letterbox, also online as well. Like and subscribe to this podcast, chaps. Appreciate your time. Thank you very much. We will catch up again next week. We'll see if Swansea have appointed and made their decision there, and catch up on all the weekend's action. See who won that Sheffield derby as well. Chaps, good to speak to you. See you again.